first time I met Chris, and I'm glad actually Tyler Hart walked in. So last July, I was supposed to hang out with a friend of mine, and Tyler calls me, and she's like, hey, do you want to have beers with Matt Kibbe from FreedomWorks? And I say, F yeah, I want to have beers with Matt Kibbe from FreedomWorks. So I go down there, and I was fairly new to politics, and I didn't know a whole lot of people, and Tyler was there, and I sat down, and then this woman came in, and she sat down next to me, and her name was Chris Cook, and we got to know each other that night, and then I was very lucky to find out that she got into the leadership program of the Rockies with me, along with Nathan. So that's how I had the opportunity to meet Chris, and now she's heading up the effort to defeat this $1 billion tax increase that's going to be on the ballot this November. And her group is called, and I hope I get this right because I practiced it, is Coloradans Against Unions Using Kids as Pawns.
Yay!
All right, without further ado, Chris Cook.
Got it right. Thank you for blinding me. Thank you so much, Brian, for that, and I'm glad that you remembered that. I'm really glad that you remembered that's where we met. When Tyler called me and asked if I wanted to have drinks with Matt Kibbe, I went, who? I'm still learning who a lot of these players are.
I never sign you up for anything unless it's awesome.
That's right. That's right. Everything that Tyler tells me to do, I want to get this out of the way. Everything Tyler tells me to do is always good. Thanks. So I'm here to talk to you tonight as the chair of Coloradans Against Unions Using Kids as Pawns, and it did take me 6 weeks to figure that one out, but I did finally get it right. And I want to tell you about this bill. I want to tell you what's going on with this tax increase, and see if I can't convince you that it's a bad idea. A child changes everything. We hold that child for the first time. And we look down in that precious face and see those precious toes and those precious fingers, and we realize that we will do anything to keep that child safe, to keep him healthy, to help him succeed. We devote all of our time to making sure that they are well-fed, they're healthy, they're safe, they have a roof over their head. And we provide everything that we can for them. And then there comes a time when we realize we can't provide everything that they need to learn. And so we hand them off to a teacher and an education system that we hope shares those priorities, that we hope shares those values, that we hope will do everything that they can to make sure that child succeeds. But what we're finding now, as we look at the reality in our schools, is that they are failing to live up to this promise. We have high dropout rates. We have flatlined test scores. They can't even prepare our kids for college. 40% of incoming freshmen have to take a remedial course before they can. We propose solutions to try to fix these problems. The union fights those solutions tooth and nail. They fight anything that has to do with accountability. They fight anything that has to do with helping reward gifted teachers who are in there doing good jobs and keeping accountable those teachers who maybe aren't so gifted. They fight all that. They fight against standardized test scores. They fight against accountability. They fight against anything that might actually give parents a voice and a choice in how their kids are being educated. What they instead do is they spend a lot of time and a lot of resources trying to make sure that you think the problem is funding. If only we would spend more, if only we would sacrifice a little more, the problems in education would all go away. The dropout rates would fall, the test scores would go up, and our children would learn better. If only we would sacrifice a little bit more, if only we would hand them more money, as much as they ask for. That's really the answer. They're counting on you believing that premise. They're counting on you being willing to sacrifice anything for your children to make sure that they succeed. So enters Senate Bill 13213.
Straight face.
I always forget what a lively crowd this is. Senate Bill 213 is the Future School Finance Act. It was introduced by and sponsored by Mike Johnston, who is a senator from Commerce City, and our old friend Raleigh Heath up in Boulder. Raleigh Heath, for those of you who don't remember, was the primary mover behind Proposition 103, which was Mr. Burns. Excellent. Thank you. He was the primary mover behind Prop 103, which was this bill's predecessor. And Millie Hamner in the House. What this bill proposes to do is to change the way that state funds are allocated to school districts throughout the state. It does this through a really complicated formula. I'm told the formula has square roots. I swear. I don't know how they're planning to implement this thing. The way that funding works now is we start with base funding for certain programs. So we have half-day kindergarten, full funding for 1 through 8. It's actually full funding for 1 through 12. I stole this from Johnston, so it's a little bit of propaganda. It has half funding for part-time high schoolers, which kind of makes sense to a degree. Then it's weighted for the size of the district, cost of living where the district is located, at risk, and then there's a negative factor to bring it back into reality, the money that's actually available to be spent. Then the state and local share, the local districts tell the state how much they have, how much they've collected, how much they've raised from local taxes, and the state backfills the rest. That's the way that it's done now, and then there's some add-ons for special ed and gifted and talented. The proposed formula starts with base funding again, where we've got now half-day preschool and a full-day kindergarten so that they can get to your kids earlier. Grades 1 through 12 funding, and then there's some backpack-type funding for those students who do choose online and ascent programs. The weights now are for small districts, not a generic size weighting factor, but it's a small district factor. At-risk students, and which was the same as before, and English language learners, which used to be a categorical. It used to be an add-on at the end. Now it's a weight. So theoretically, you could have a student who doesn't speak English in a small district who is in an at-risk or a reduced lunch program who will triple weight that formula for those school districts. That doesn't seem right. The state and local share then is added on. At this point, we'll get into this a little bit in a minute, the state determines how much the local district will contribute. They'll decide how much that local district is able to raise, and then the state backfills the difference. If you don't think that part is going to be political, I've got some swampland in Florida to sell you. Then you have the categoricals, special ed, gifted and talented, most of the same ones except for the ELLs, and then some additional supports for some smaller programs that they're implementing in this bill. What they're trying to do, well, the other big change that they're making, which isn't part of the formula, is they're changing how the students are counted. And what we do now is that we count, I believe it's on 1 day a year, it might be 2, where butts in the seats equal students who are counted for purposes of funding, and you're nodding, so that's good. What they're changing it to is an average daily membership. So it's a daily count of students, which of course involves a lot more administration, a lot more paperwork, computer systems that will need to be upgraded and changed and implemented in order to make that happen. And then on top of that, they've got a hold harmless provision in this bill so that districts with declining populations aren't hit for declining populations. So the kid moves out of their district to another district, and he's counted in both districts under that type of an idea. Okay?
It's like fractional reserve kids.
Chris, save that.
I'm using that. Russ, I am so using that. Thank you. Fractional reserve kids. Okay, straight face. Another thing that it does is it removes the cost of living from the formula. So we saw back here, there's no cost of living in the weights anymore. They were up here, but they're not in the new formula. So what that does is it says that it costs exactly the same number of dollars to educate a child in an expensive mountain community as it does to educate a child in Ray or Hugo or Commerce City. There you go. It doesn't, of course. You need teachers. They have to have housing. You know, the cost of living is always going to be higher in these areas with the cost of living, where the cost of living is higher. So you need to, educational expenses will be higher where the cost of living is higher. So you need to adjust for that. They've taken that out completely. This is the big one for me. It uses potential local tax revenue versus actual local tax revenue. So this is, that's not exactly, and that's exactly my point. It's not, it's going to be so political, it's going to be so charged, and it's going to be so non-transparent. How they come up with those funding levels that the local district is supposed to come up with, there is no way that they could be accountable. There's no way for us to hold them accountable.
Plus it's pressure to raise taxes.
And it's pressure to raise taxes, and that's the other point. We were talking about this earlier.
It's a feature, not a bug.
That's exactly the way Johnston would sell it, I'm sure. The state telling local districts how much they need to assess in mills is wrong.
Yep.
The local districts need to have that authority. They need to have that decision-making in their purview, not in the state's. So what that does is it sets the stage for income redistribution. This is communism. This is socialism. The history of 213, a couple years ago, Johnston convened the School Finance Partnership. He brought together what he calls a broad coalition that is made up of the teachers' union. So I don't know how broad that is. Both kinds, country and Western. It's the steering committee, which was the decision-making body of the School Finance Partnership, which drafted the bill, was made up of CASB, CASE, all of the allied organizations around the CEA. They started from the premise that money fixes the problems, not with an analysis of how the problems need to be fixed. We wonder why the problems never go away. If you can't see this, which you possibly can, it's a flat tire and a Democrat throwing money at the flat tire. That's not how you fix a flat tire. The legislative history on this, of course, it was first introduced into the Senate, and it went through committee hearings in the Senate and in the House. In the Senate is where we get the infamous comment from Chair Evie Hudak telling Senator Owen Hill that he needed to flip a coin to decide how he wanted to vote on this. I still don't get that one. It passed out of both committees. It's passed out of committees in both the House and the Senate, based strictly on a party line vote. Then it went to floor votes in the Senate. There were amendments suggested. There were amendments that were introduced. All of the amendments were rejected. Reasonable performance-based amendments coming from our side of the aisle were rejected simply because they came from our side of the aisle. This shows that they have absolutely no interest in true reform. All they want is our money. It passed the Senate on April 2nd. Every single vote for it was from a Democrat. Every single vote against it was from a Republican. So I'm pleased that they stuck together on this. It passed the House on April 24th. Again, every single vote for it was from a Democrat. Every single vote against it was from a Republican. It was signed by Governor Hickenlooper on May 21st. So legislatively, it's done. So now what do we do? The good news about this bill is that it will not go into effect until Colorado voters vote on it. Because of Tabor, we get a say.
Hurrah!
Yay! We get to vote on the billion with a B dollar tax increase. Did you want to come do this? Colorado's voters get the final say on this bill, regardless of what the legislature is trying to do to us. There are right now 22 different ballot initiatives that are in play. They are all trying to raise your taxes. They're all a little bit different, but they're all trying to raise your taxes. And more importantly, they're all trying to shut down the conversation about true education reform. Until we keep that, if we don't give in to their ransom demands, then we can continue negotiations with the hostage takers. The most likely initiatives include a progressive tax with a top bracket of over 7% for families earning $75,000 to $100,000 in taxable income. Folks, I'm a CPA. This is what I do for a living. That is not hard to reach. Most families that have 2 income earners are going to hit that mark. And so you're going to see a marginal rate of double what you're paying. Yeah. The fiscal impact of this has been estimated by the Legislative Council to be between $897 million and $1.1 billion. There were numbers that were thrown out earlier that was $2 billion, but that was a mistake by the Legislative Council, who forgot that it was a marginal tax increase. Kind of makes you wonder how much we can depend on the fiscal notes as well. This is 3 times the size of Prop 103. 3 times the size. So we decided to fight it. As I said before, I'm the chair of Coloradans Against Unions Using Kids as Pawns. We were formed on tax day. And we were formed to oppose the increase and to get the message out. Help you guys understand and help you have things to talk to your neighbors and your friends about, the things that are bad about this bill. We have 3 main problems with this bill. The first one is that it is the largest tax increase in Colorado's history. The second is that it's not reform, it's redistribution. And the third is that it dishonors some of Colorado's most cherished education traditions. Forgot I did that. The truth is that there's very little in this bill about reform, and very little that has to do with educating children. It benefits the bureaucrats. It's for the grown-ups. This is not for the kids. It's a $1 billion tax increase. Now, to put that in perspective, our current funding for K through 12 education in the state of Colorado is about $3 billion. So this is an over 33% increase. This is money spent on a system that is failing our kids. We can't afford to continue throwing this money away. And I heard somebody mention para earlier, and this is a really important point. Thank you, Wendy. This is a really important point. I think all of you probably know that para is underfunded by like $27 billion.
Yay!
Russ is happy about that. The rest of us aren't so much. Even para, the Public Employee Retirement Association. Did I get that right? Account? Thank you. Okay, it's the Public Employee Retirement Account. And it's a quasi-governmental organization meant to provide a defined benefit pension to public employees in Colorado. They've made a lot of promises on that system, and they've built in to those promises an 8% return. I don't think anybody's getting 8% returns anymore. So they are underfunded by a huge amount. And the thing is that this is going to go into the school district's budgets. It's going to go into the school district's coffers, and then they're going to turn around and pay it back to para. This is backfill. This is paying off promises to the union. What this bill does is it increases income taxes, and it hurts the most valuable earners in our state. The people who are producing the most, the people who are providing the most value, we're going to punish them. We're going to tell them, bad for you for succeeding. This is Prop 103 on crack. We turned down Prop 103 handily in 2011. It was 2-1, Regina? Yeah. It's 2-1. We defeated it. We need to do the same thing again. The second problem we have is that it's not reform, it's redistribution. This is socialism. It doesn't contain a single reform measure. made those really small. There's no specific measures to reduce class size, no specific plan to improve test scores. It doesn't tie at-risk funding to actual performance. There's not a single measurable reform component in this bill. The reform measures that were offered that I mentioned earlier to amend this bill were all rejected. Senator Renfro introduced a bill to tie at-risk student funding to test scores in order to connect the student performance with the funding. That makes sense, right? Not to them. Senator Lundberg from Berthoud and others talked about school choice and incorporating school choice into this bill. They didn't think that was a good idea either. Senator Marble introduced tax incentives for private school choice. 3 guesses on what happened with that one. Right. These were reasonable minor performance-based amendments that were introduced, and every single one of them was rejected. There's nothing bipartisan about this bill at all. And it's because the proponents of this bill are not interested in actually reforming education and fixing the problems. They are only interested in your income. They want to redistribute it. And that's inequitable. What they're trying to do is they're trying to arbitrarily take from one district and give to another. That's the purpose of that formula that we looked at earlier. It's their formula, crafted by their bureaucrats, and crafted by their union officials and politicians in Denver to control everything else that's happening in the state. It's the legislative equivalent of taking money from one kid and giving it to another kid in line. For example, Douglas County has 7.5% of the students in the state. They'll get 3.3% of the new funding under the bill. That's a negative 4.2% outcome. But Denver, 9.5% of the students and 16.4% of the new funding. That's a 6.9% benefit. And that 16.9 or 4% of $1 billion per year is a lot of money. This is divisive. It pits neighbors against neighbors, it pits districts against the state, and it pits Coloradans against each other at a time where we ought to be pulling together to fix the problems in education. Doing it by dividing us is not the way to make sure that happens. Finally, this bill dishonors some of Colorado's most cherished education traditions. It's destroying school choice and fair funding. It's destroying the charter schools. And it destroys power at the local level. They're taking the local out of local schools with this. They're creating central planning. The bureaucrats in Denver are deciding what's best for students in the rest of the state, Littleton, Sulphur Springs, or Rifle. That's not right. Those decisions need to rest locally with the local school board. And because it does that, it silences the voices of the parents, the school boards, and the advocates for true education reform who really want to see their communities changed by their actions and by their choice. So, this is not just about voting in November. And I hope that I've impressed that upon you. This is not just about a tax increase. This is about the future of Colorado. The unions have already indicated that if they pass this, they're going after Tabor next. And what happens when that happens, if Tabor is ever defeated, you don't get to decide. You no longer get a voice in how your government is run. You vote every 2 years, and then they want you to go away. So here's how to fight back. Number one, commit right now to voting no. When you see that education tax increase and it's sold to you with flowery language, realize what it really is and say no. Don't sign the petitions. Now, they did a really interesting thing on this. They could have referred this tax increase to the ballot. The legislature could have. And instead, they decided not to do that, I think primarily because none of them wanted their fingers on a $1 billion tax increase. And so they decided to go the initiative route, which means that there's going to be petitions circulated all throughout this summer until they decide which one of the 22 is going to come out on top. You will be approached. You will be approached to ask to sign these petitions. Don't sign them if you can. And I know that there's probably some people in this room who just have a policy of signing all petitions so they can be fought out on the ballot. It would be a great thing if none of them actually made it to the ballot. I could go on vacation eventually. It would be nice. Join us in getting the message out. You can talk to your friends and neighbors. You can like us on Facebook. You can find us at Kids Not Pawns. You can also follow us on Twitter. We kept that going, so it's at Kids Not Pawns. And our website is at www.kidsnotpawns.org. You can volunteer. There should be somewhere around here, a yellow notepad. Thank you. If you would like to get involved, please go ahead and put your email address and your name on that notepad, and we will get you in our database. We'll keep you up to date. We'll send you updates on what's going on if you're not on Facebook and you don't follow Twitter and you still would like to be involved. There's a lot of ways that you can be involved, and you can join our campaign. You can join the Speakers Bureau and go take presentations out to different venues and stuff. That would be wonderful. Writing letters to the editor, if you're more of a writer, even op-eds, 750 words that say, this is really bad, don't vote for it. Probably more eloquently than that, but give it a shot. Poll watching. Another big feature of the legislative session this past session was House Bill 1303, the voter fraud bill, which is going to make the election incredibly interesting. So one thing that we're going to need is poll watchers and people to keep the integrity of this election as much as possible. You can help us get out the vote. You can help us in hundreds of ways. And so I hope you'll consider volunteering with us. You can go to our website or you can sign up on that page. You can also donate. One of the things that we need to do is get flyers out. I don't have a flyer sitting on that table. I don't have Allison pointing at it so prettily.
Chris is your flyer.
I am your flyer, but you can't take me home, sorry.
What?
You get to take me home. But donations are needed so that we can print up flyers. We can get speakers collateral. We can get some radio ads up, hopefully, and do some messaging, some paid messaging that way. So if you're inclined to donate, that would be wonderful. So in conclusion, we started this conversation talking about our children and how we would do anything to help them have every advantage that we possibly find. Let's not let those in power use our kids as pawns in their fight to line their own pockets. Let's make sure that we are... Brad's going to kill me. I actually have been to Toastmasters. Let's make sure that what we're really doing is giving them what they really need. A real education reform package. Something that actually is going to raise test scores, that is going to lower dropout rates, that is going to help kids succeed and prepare them for the life that they have ahead of them. Thank you.